Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another show. We've got a special guest on with us tonight, Marcus Bozza, who is at Herd Immunity News on Twitter, and he also has a YouTube channel. I will be putting the links up to that during the transmission. Sorry about the background, that's the Oldham map. But if you've looked at our flyer, we're going to be talking about ULEZ CAZ, 15-minute cities, and stuff like that. It should be interesting because I'm a bit of a devil's advocate, me. I like some of the stuff that the government want to bring out, but that's just me. But nevertheless, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the panel, the awesome Pat McGinnis and the holy Paul Rimmer.
Hello.
Marcus is on. You'll hear his voice, but he's not showing a thing. He's in the background at the moment. But welcome, Marcus, and thank you for joining us.
Well, welcome, and thank you very much for the kind invitation onto your show. So I'll be speaking like Big Brother. I'm watching you, but you can't see me. Pretty much like the ULEZ program and the NPR cameras. Look, I first got interested in this. If you want to hear the sort of origins of where I came into this, gentlemen,
yes, please
feel free to jump in at any time. But I lived in Bromley in Kent for many years, from the mid-90s up till about 2007, 2008. So I've got pretty good contacts in that area. I've got a lot of friends, even some family members now within that area. And I've always stood for liberty. I've stood for freedom of business movement, low taxation, help small to medium-sized enterprises. I'm a former Brexit Party candidate. So in 2016, I threw my hat into the ring and stood as a member of the Brexit Party for probably similar reasons to yourselves, if we will explore that later on. But on the ULEZ, what I was hearing from friends and relatives is that this new scheme was being introduced by Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan. Now, whenever Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan's involved, it requires some further investigation. Now, when the first day I heard that some of the vehicles that they had were not compliant to these new ULEZ regulations. So we look into the ULEZ regulations that have been imposed. And these are based on reports done by Imperial College London. Now, Imperial College London, I'm sure you'll all know about them because they kind of came to the fore during the lockdown period, the COVID era back in 2020. So doing further investigation into the report that said 4,000 people a year were dying due to air pollution from these non-compliant vehicles, thanks to, in no small part, Mr. Howard Cox of the Reform Party, not doing any party political advert for the Reform Party, believe that or not. However, Howard had done some great work in establishing that this 4,000 deaths a year figure from the ICL reports from Professors Kelly, they were paid for. There was about £900,000 paid for this report. And on reflection from the Freedom of Information request, it was found that there had been one death, not 4,000 deaths. This was a projection. And as it's been brought out in the media, the figures were used to push the narrative. They were challenged in court by Bromley Council, which some of my friends and family members were involved with. Obviously, the skeptic would say that the courts would never stand by logic and reasoning and rationale. They'll stick with what Imperial College said, and that's where we're at just now. We see it in Liverpool, Bristol, Birmingham, Glasgow. It's scheduled for Edinburgh, Inverness. Basically, every city in the UK and every town will be ULEZ. Angela Rayner blurted that out. That's the Labour deputy leader. That's Angela Scumrainer, as we lovingly call her, because she labelled anyone sort of left of the Labour Party as scum. Lovely lady, absolute charmer. Don't know if you've met her, but she's a gem. So on the back of that, the ULEZ program's been rolled out. LEZ, it's called in Scotland. You have £60 a day fines in Scotland and Glasgow. Anybody driving a non-compliant car will be fined £60. Down in London and Greater London, it's £12.50, despite the air being cleaner than ever before, thanks to the technology that we have now that's been brought in for the last 10 to 15 years, and cleaner diesel and cleaner petrol. The evidence that's been shown and put forward is bollocks. It's probably the nicest way to put it. Absolute bollocks. It's been tried and tested to say that the London Underground is actually more lethal. Again, Howard Cox is one of the people that we've interviewed on Herd Immunity News. He's gone down with his clean level indicator and found out that it's 10 times more toxic and polluted down there. In Glasgow, after the introduction of the low emission zone, it's actually been found that there's been an 11% increase in the particles, because cars are also hit with speed restrictions. So the cars are idling, so they're stuck in third gear, or if you've got a sports car, high second gear, and you're actually emitting more, so you're pumping more diesel or petrol out into the atmosphere. Now, what's happened is, may I just say at the beginning that I'm sure myself and none of us here are advocating any criminality to any property. Let's just get that right from the start. We're certainly not doing that publicly. So I got word last April, March 2023 that locals were taking matters into their own hands. And there was a group that had come about. God knows where this actually formed, but I heard the rumours that they were calling themselves the Blade Runners. Maybe in reference to the 1982 Ridley Scott classic starring Harrison Ford. So they were doing the blading and running away. Maybe that's how they got the name, the etymology of the name. But certainly this is a case of owners of small to medium-sized enterprises and locals, or people who just cannot afford electric cars. They cannot afford compliant cars. They're struggling to survive, taking matters into their own hands because perhaps, as they see it, the courts, the councillors, the MPs have let them down. And when they're staring science and logic in the face to say that the numbers were wrong, the science was flawed, one can even suggest the science was corrupted by massive payments out to Gary Kelly and Professor Fuller from Imperial College London. One has to ask if there's a conflict of interests there. Are they only as good as money can get? Have they been swayed by nearly £1 million in funding? Who knows? It's up for the public to decide. But when I think people are at their wits' end, they've taken matters into their own hands. And last year, we calculated from our insiders on the street who live in these areas that perhaps 3,000 cameras have been retired. Let me just explain to your viewers and listeners, meaning that the cameras are no longer fit for purpose, or in some cases they've been reallocated to different parts of the country. The Daily Mail were the first ones to pick up on this, God bless them, but then the BBC picked up on the term Blade Runners. We were the first channel at Herd Immunity News to coin that term and coin that phrase, Blade Runners. So we decided to go down and actually meet some people who are really at the front of the fight back in this, if I'm being honest. These are the people who live in Kent, in Bromley, and in southeast England, in Greater London. They're not the biggest Sadiq Khan supporters in the world. Let me just put it that way, politely. There's not really much love lost between the people in the southeast and Sadiq Khan for a plethora of reasons: political, religious, and you know, there's a whole other video to do on that. But I went down to speak to these people, guys, because I wanted to find out what was motivating them. These are law-abiding people. These are people who don't really have much more than, say, like a business that's reliant on their vehicles, whether it be driving to your work, to your local supermarket, or plumbers, plasterers, painters, just your normal white van men, your gammons, your scourge of the earth and humanity, people like myself and yourselves. So I was fascinated because this seemed to be a resistance that many people have been looking for in some ways. That there are another group called the Vanguards. I don't know if you've seen them. They take placards and they actually block these vans that TfL, Transport for London, have put on the streets. Some of these vans have gone onto streets where they've got no right to be there because they're not in the ULEZ area themselves. We've had reports of 1,200 drivers with compliant vehicles being fined in the first place. We interviewed a chap called Noel Wilcox, who was the famous scaffolder who took TfL to court because their signage didn't make it clear. It was viewed and ruled by the judge that the signs were unlawful because they would just be very vague and have this sign up saying ULEZ and nothing else. Nothing was made clear to say that you'd actually be fined. We've had reports of, I think there's up to maybe 100,000 drivers now being falsely fined, and they're looking to claim their money back. Some of them have been waiting 18 months. And in the case of Noel Wilcox, he's still waiting on his money back from TfL. He won his case, but he's still waiting on, I think it's about £11,000, which they have just taken. Now, if we had read about this in the papers or seen it on our programme, if you're old enough to remember That's Life or Watchdog, you'd remember that there are all these companies scamming people out their money based on flawed science, whether it be timeshares in Marbella or wherever. And this seems to be the biggest scam of all scams. It's happening up in Scotland. We are seeing some resistance to it up here. But sadly, or rightly or wrongly, we'll let the public decide. Nothing's actually happening and people are being fleeced off their funds. So where it's at just now, it's with the candidates in London, it's with the candidates in Birmingham, Liverpool, Glasgow. It's very difficult to find a party now, a political party that doesn't back net zero. That's the major parties that I'm talking about here. The Conservatives have really backed it themselves. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, the Conservative Prime Minister, backs net zero all the way. He's signed up to the Paris Climate Accord. He has reluctantly put out some contracts and tenures to us getting North Sea oil and gas. I don't want to get too far away from my net zero thoughts and beliefs, but all these measures are based on net zero. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if we keep them in place, people are going to get poorer and they're not going to find any way out of the poverty they find themselves in.
You're on mute, John.
Thanks. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for that. A lot of wise words. I mean, I'm in Manchester, and as soon as Andy Burnham said he wanted to bring in the CAZ tax, within a couple of months, there was an 80,000 strong Facebook group, and he backed down. He backed down from public pressure. We didn't have to go blocking any cameras or anything. His wife was linked to the company that made the cameras and stuff like that. And I mean, overall, I mean, obviously they want to watch us more and all that lot. But the simple fact is, councils don't have money now because they're run by box tickers. Oldham Council couldn't wait to get into CAZ tax. They knew they'd make a killing. I started my campaign 2021. And Pat started his, and these were what people were telling us at the door about ULEZ and CAZ tax and stuff like that. Guys saying they're going to have to change the vans and stuff like that, get new vans, this, that, and the other. In the picture that I've got in the background and the picture towards this, one of the biggest like pushbacks for the CAZ tax were taxi drivers in Greater Manchester. They were fuming. They were absolutely fuming. And I mean, I think there's the odd town and stuff like that didn't want to be enrolled in it, but Oldham couldn't wait. Oldham doesn't have any money. They couldn't wait to get that money, you know, and spend it on whatever. And, you know, it's ridiculous. And the net zero thing, we became a party. Within 3 months, we'd been emailed off a lobbying group asking us to agree with the net zero things and all that lot. And I haven't even emailed them back. So that's a power that we don't have at the moment, lobbying. And I want to get into this lobbying. But yeah, the 15-minute cities, we've seen protests in Oxford, weren't it, over that couple of big protests in Oxford. And I don't know where they stand on whether they've got the 15-minute city thing and that. I just don't know where they stand on that. But obviously, and the technology now, the cameras, we've got facial recognition in and stuff like that. And it's not just facial recognition. They can recognize you by your walk. They can recognize you by your mannerisms that you do. If they've got all this kind of data in the database and stuff like that. So, you know, and it scares a lot of people. I know it does. It really does scare a lot of people. And it's obviously part of the agenda to go green and net zero and stuff like that. But, you know, it is interesting. But again, so many people have stood up against the ULEZ, the CAZ tax, the 15-minute cities and stuff like that. I just want to say, Marcus said it earlier on, but I do not condone the Blade Runners. I don't, because even though Lawrence Fox said what it is, the thing is, a government will come after you for money and give you a bigger sentence than if you've raped 5 girls. That's what the government will do when you take their money and you destroy their money. And I've been absolute against destroying stuff that costs money. Like I said, one of them Blade Runners is going to get caught one day. He'll be doing 15 years, yet we've got child rapists who have raped half a dozen girls just doing 2 or 3 years. It's just backwards how they relate to the money. But Pat, over to you.
Yes, thanks, John, and thank you, Marcus, Bozza, for coming on. Great to hear your story and the information you've given. Yeah, it's fascinating what you were saying. It's very, very interesting. I mean, it was nice to know that you lived in London as well, so you know what it's like. I live in central London, and we were the guinea pigs for the ULEZ, and you know, it happened to us first. Also, you know, we congestion charge as well. But the ULEZ, I had to change my vehicle when it first came in about 3 years ago. And I didn't want to change my vehicle. You know, I'm a working class man, and I need, you know, I don't want to have to spend more money on a vehicle. So I changed my vehicle for this upgraded ULEZ compliant vehicle. And, you know, only the other day we're getting letters through our door telling that they're going to be closing some roads around near where I live. And they're saying, oh, we're going to close them because we want to make the air cleaner. And so I've emailed them back. I said, hold on a minute. You've made me change my van, saying that the air's polluted and we have to get these new vehicles. And now you're still saying you still want to make it more cleaner. It's a never-ending persecution of our movement, of our freedoms. And only the other day I saw a man. He had a Nissan Cube. I don't know if anyone knows this vehicle. It's quite a eccentric looking vehicle. It literally looks like a little box. But they were imports, and his one was a 2004 petrol, and you know, it's petrol, but it doesn't pass the ULEZ, and he's got to pay £12.50 every time he drives it, and you know, the actual emissions from that particular vehicle does actually pass, but Sadiq can't put a blanket ban on all imports, all petrol imports. What were before 2006, and this was 2004. So, yeah, it was interesting what you're saying, all this stuff. And another thing, what you said was, you know, about how many people have actually died how many people have actually died from this pollution? Because I don't know anyone. I've lived in London all my life, central London, born and bred. I don't know anyone who's died from pollution. It's just a massive get up. And I mean, sounds like someone done the research, and it turns out only one person has. I think that's what you said in your statistics. You said that. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to ask you some questions just quickly, Marcus, if that's all right. Firstly, do you belong to a political party at the moment, Marcus?
No.
Oh, that's
Certainly
interesting.
not as an independent producer and presenter of an independent news station. No, I don't.
Right. Okay, interesting. Just thought I'd ask that.
Yeah.
Also, do you think that ULEZ will be scrapped eventually in London?
Well, in order for that to happen, Pat, there would have to be serious change in government and local government, and also those cities that have mayors. There'd have to be change there. I know that having interviewed Howard Cox, he would certainly scrap it.
Yeah.
We hope to interview George Galloway as well, because he's going to be standing as London Mayor. George Galloway, of course, needs no introduction. He's the leader of the Workers' Party and former Labour Party MP. He's going to scrap it, even though he's left-leaning. We are certainly not a leftist channel.
Yeah.
Susan Hall, the Conservative candidate, says that she's going to scrap it, but she's going to keep the cameras.
Oh, interesting.
Now, when asked, she's going to keep the cameras to keep you all safe. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that charming? So you can sleep safely in your bed at night, Pat, knowing that Susan Hall will be watching you. There won't be any police on the streets, of course, because 95% of the police force are looking at online crimes. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea where we're at.
I mean, we are discussing ULEZ, but we need to remember we've got the LTNs as well, which are crippling businesses. They're making people lonely. They're making elderly and disabled lonely because people don't want to drive into London anymore. There's no parking spaces anywhere because they put cycle routes everywhere on the high streets. You cannot stop anywhere, literally. And there's businesses going out of businesses. But one other question I wanted to ask quickly before we move on to Paul is, these cameras what are being retired, which we're all dead against, obviously. It's mainly Southeast London. Is it happening all around London, or is it just a couple of hotspots?
It is happening all around London, but in Greater London, where I would say Sadiq Khan has less of a following, and to be honest, where the argument for clean air is a lot weaker. The argument for clean air may well be in the most congested parts of the city of London itself, looking at even to the West End, through all the major boroughs that are right in the heart of London. But when you get out to Greenwich, you get out Catford, Lewisham, and then you start heading out into Bromley, Bexley. I mean, this is the Garden of England. There's hardly any pollution out there. People just need to get about their business. And without that argument, without the science to back it up, when hundreds of thousands of drivers who have compliant cars are being fined, the money's being kept, what do you expect people to do? They've gone to their MPs, they've gone to their councillors, they've tried it through the courts, and they're being told to do one. So I think you're getting to that tipping point now where none of us are publicly saying that this is a good idea to touch any equipment. However, they can protest peacefully. However, I don't know if you've seen in the news that there's this new ULEZ squad that have been employed by Sadiq Khan. Now, these are guys who look like they've maybe just come out of the shopping mall, or they've come off helping migrants over the border from Circle. Now, these guys don't have any identification. They've got little cameras attached, body cameras attached to them. From the reports we've heard from locals at the scene, they're actually being very abusive. In some cases, they're shoving the vanguards out the way who have placards, which they can...
Right, Marcus?
Say that again, sorry, Pat?
And their faces are covered, right?
Yep, all their faces are covered. They must be terrified that there's a new COVID variant. Maybe it's variant X that they're all crapping themselves over. But look, these people are using bully boy tactics to intimidate a lot of some of them are very elderly people who are going out peacefully and legally with their signs, and they're blocking the ULEZ camera vans. So the bully boys have been set in to intimidate them off the plot, and this is with taxpayers' money. This is with knife crime out of control. These are, as you're touching on, I think, John, about the rapes, about the absolute focus that Sadiq Khan has on the ULEZ protesters, but he doesn't seem to have any focus on knife crimes or the sexual crimes that are going out throughout our cities, not just London.
Yeah. So just one more thing, and we'll move on to Paul. So
poor Paul, he's sitting there thinking. You're all right, Paul.
So this is obviously their excuse is net zero, and if anyone looks on our website and goes to our policies, we've got a policy to scrap all of these, even the carbon-free housing thing by 2035, electric car 2030, ULEZ, LTNs. Sorry, say that again, Marcus.
Well, heat pumps. There are heat pump regulations coming in now. Certainly the SNP and Greens have imposed heat pump regulations. You will not be able to rent your property out unless you have a heat pump by 2027.
Yeah, so
you'll pay a £15,000 fine.
Yeah. So they're giving this reason that it's the net zero because of the planet and all that. But
that's it.
ULEZ cameras, that's the ULEZ. That's what do you think, Marcus, is behind this? What is the real reason that they're going for this? Because I mean, most of us kind of agree that it's a hoax that humans are creating this climate change, but they're using this to basically persecute everyone and tax everyone. What do you think the real reason is?
It's quite an involved question that you've put to me, Pat. John mentioned earlier on the 15-minute cities. We know that Sadiq Khan is a member of the C20 group, and he has investments into the C20 group, which I don't want to sound like a mad tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, but when you look at how closely these initiatives are linked to the World Economic Forum and their desires for us to not go anywhere, not have anything, not own anything, and eat the most basic of winged beastie crawling across the floor, you have to put the dots together and say, my God, what are these people all about? It seems that the people who are addicted to net zero are in reverse gear economically. And if you look at the BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the 40 countries waiting to join them, they have no interest in net zero. Their economies are booming, and they're booming on the back of fossil fuels because it's cheap, it's available, it's accessible, unlike the green ideology of solar panels, windmills. But we're all for cleaner water, we're all for cleaner air. Of course we are. We want to give that to our kids and our grandkids, but we certainly don't want to make our grandchildren poorer and be at the runt of the litter when it comes to productivity and manufacturing. I think we have to just look at the money and where the investment's going, where you get situations like, I don't want to go too deeply into it, but when you have people like Barry Gardiner of the Labour Party being donated nearly £250,000, Theresa May was given money when she was the Prime Minister from the CCP, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's wife works for the CCP on one of their news channels. You really need to start looking at where foreign investment has been placed to hurt this country severely.
Over to you, Paul.
Barry Gardiner was a friend of mine at university, passionate Labour man, but a total fraud, just on the take. And it's like everything else, follow the money. You know, people say follow the science. The science gets the results that the money dictate. The scientists are just paid. Then it's not objective science. It's just manipulation. So we've got this whole, it's a global agenda in it. We're talking about globalism now. We're talking about controlling people, controlling our lives down to the microscopic level, from big global institutions, global forums, and they have almost legal frameworks to impose this on various countries. It's a bit like the pandemic. They made everybody lock down, didn't they? I mean, we started to see world leaders getting assassinated who resisted lockdown. I think there was 5 in Africa alone. I think the president of Haiti was assassinated. Anyone who goes against this globalist control agenda is eliminated and is driven out of power. I mean, I think Boris Johnson was driven out of power because he would not buckle to the globalist agenda, even though he buckled a lot. I think the same with Trump. So there's a political motive behind all these schemes. The actual reality that somehow man affects the global climate is the biggest load of nonsense in history. There is no climate change. In Britain, we have weather. The climate changes every single day as we experience it. The idea that, we have polluted cities. We're a windswept island. Nothing stays static in Britain. Everything's just blown away. We have endless rain to purify the air. Nature's controlled by cycles, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the water cycle, and everything's regulated by nature. Man cannot affect these cycles. Even if any sort of variation is quickly ironed out, nature has its own path of self-regulation. So the idea that we're saving the planet and the propaganda and the lies that have gone into that for the last 50 years is just bizarre. But it's all like a game of control. Now, it's not only ULEZ, ultra-low emission zones, which are an absolute nightmare, and the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which again, it's all control. It's all like stopping us from having momentum in life. That's what I felt with the pandemic. It just took all the momentum out of life. And that was politically, it was very useful for these globalists because they want to dominate and they don't want any opposition to gain momentum, because there needs to be a populist uprising against this. Now, we've just seen recently in Germany that the farmers came on the streets. They're still on the streets now. The main cities in Germany. That, Marcus?
Yeah, I've seen that. It's happening in Canada. It's happening in Italy. The Farmers' Party actually won election, didn't they, over in Holland?
Well, that's about the increase in the price of diesel, which is another aspect of this agenda that they're pushing onto us. They're increasing it's a way of taking money from us, and the bureaucracy, the managerial class, the globalists, they'll use that money for their own ends. They're enriching themselves while they're impoverishing us, but they're also disempowering us. I mean, it's not just the climate control, the ULEZ agenda, whatever, all these other agendas. It's also the great replacement. They're actually destroying our sense of community, our sense of belonging, our sense of nationhood, our sense of having democratic control over our societies. This plays into this whole agenda. Control goes from the people to them. And they've all agreed this at a supranational level through global institutions. Like, we're just trying to control immigration, trying to stop these boats coming in across the channel, or trying to regulate these bogus asylum seekers or whatever. We can't do it because we're locked into these international treaties. And they claim these have legal precedents, which they don't. We need to opt out of them. We need independence. This is what Trump did in America. He pulled America out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He pulled America out of a lot of these globalist agendas, and he was intending to pull them out of more. That's why they torpedoed Trump. And if they can torpedo the president of America, they can control us. But we have to resist. And we're seeing in Germany this massive resistance. As you say, it's in France as well. It's in Italy. It's in the Netherlands. The truckers have got involved. Small businesses have got involved. Anyone who has to use a car needs to get involved. And I was really impressed with what John said about the Andy Burnham being opposed by 80,000 people on Facebook in a Facebook group campaign. We need to utilize social media to do this. Obviously, they ultimately have control of social media. But as you said earlier, Marcus, Twitter's been a liberation to many of us. It's allowed us to express what we think. So we need to push back. It's only the people power that can actually stop this. We have to organize and push back. What they're terrified of in Germany is that the AfD, it's got to have a political expression ultimately. The AfD are on the verge of taking power in various länder. Germany's divided into sub-states. And this is going to disempower their people. It's going to remove their people from seats and from power. And it's going to give control to the people's parties, to the populists. Now, they won't rest with that, the globalist elite, the power players. At every opportunity, they're seeking to undermine the will of the people. And we're going to see this year in America in the presidential election. We're going to see it in Germany and many other elections. But we need a force in Britain. We've got to get active politically. We've got to make these issues motivating, to mobilize people, to get our people going. It's got to have a political expression. It can have a resistance at street level, and that's excellent. It can have a resistance in terms of blocking roads, like we see with the farmers' protest, but ultimately that needs a political expression. We need a political party to take state power so we can stop these people. Otherwise, it's just a relentless agenda. And it's not just a Tory agenda, it's a Labour agenda as well, the Lib Lab Con. Because once Labour get in power, they're going to push this even more to an incredible extreme. You mentioned Angela Scum Rayner. Labour get in power, and then what? There'll be an all-out attack on the British people at every level. So we've got to get ready for that. We've got to man up for that. We've got to have our organisations in place that we can react to that. This is one of the reasons we formed the National Housing Party, that we will be a voice at the local level and then hopefully at a higher level against this whole agenda to mobilise people. Even this show, even our platform on Twitter, and we can ally with other political parties. But we've got to come together as a popular movement in Britain to resist this abuse. It's an abuse of the British people. It's all based on fraudulent science. It's all based on a political agenda of disempowering the people, taking the people's money, bleeding them dry, and rendering them powerless to resist. We saw it in the pandemic. We had to eventually respond, and we're going to have to respond to this with a mass movement. John?
Thanks for that, Paul. Thank you. And, very intelligent speaking in all the points. I just want to be devil's advocate a minute. So, besides a ULEZ CAZ tax, they want to take our cash away, don't they? They want us to go bankless. Now, a couple of years ago, I met up with a guy, Andrew Patrick, and his title is Britain's #1 whistleblower. And he blew the whistle on an American company that was ripping off English tax money. And his case is that powerful that normally he has to have a solicitor next to him when he speaks about it. He showed me all the articles to do with it, so it's true. Now, he worked for a banking system. So on a Sunday, when you put $3,000 into the bank, they do checks to see where that $3,000's come from. And they used to get, this company he worked for, they used to get like 30 minutes to check these payments. All of a sudden, that got dropped down to under 5 minutes, and the money was all laundered money. It was all laundered money going in. So they dropped that time, so all that money just went into the system and was laundered through the system. No wonder people want to come to the UK, because it's easy to get away with it here. Now, on the devil's advocate side, if we had cashless, then you wouldn't be able to do that. It would be a lot difficult to launder money. And when I mean laundering money, I don't just mean like 100 quid. I'm talking about billions of pounds laundered through our system. So that's money that we're not getting in taxes and stuff like that. So, and I only knew this because of him. Before that, I would have been in total agreement with cashless society, but I would have been totally against a cashless society. But when he told me that, I thought about it, and I thought, all that money being laundered, and no wonder people like to come to England, because our systems that we have here are so flawed. Now, when it comes to the ULEZ and CAZ tax, I'm totally against it. I believe it's just for them to suck more money out of us. It's nothing to do with net zero. They just want to suck us dry, bleed us dry, which they're doing all the time. They're doing through our fuel now. Everything. They're just bleeding us dry. They're bleeding the British establishment, well, the United Kingdom dry. And they're doing that because everybody hates the United Kingdom. Doesn't matter where you're from, they just hate us. They want all our money and they're just sucking us dry. And that's what they're doing. When Oldham found out about the CAZ tax, he couldn't wait to get in. Oh, yeah, we want part of it. I could tell you that Oldham don't have any money. We have a £500 million a year family tax credit bill. Poverty is high in Oldham. We have 3 or 4 wards in the top 10 of the most impoverished wards in the UK. Our council doesn't have a P to we in. It doesn't have anything like that. So they want the money. And that's with a lot of councils around the country. But they only want the money because they're a crap council and it's run by box tickers and they don't know how to manage things. You know what I mean? We've got a gangsters mole leading our council at the moment. A gangsters mole. That's what I'm saying, right? She's all right, stood next to convicted kidnappers who sexually tortured the victims and stuff like that. She's not a person to run the council, and that's a lot of councils around the country. So any of these ULEZ things will be like that, the councils. Yes, we'll get some money. We'll get some. That's what they're like. And it's just so wrong. And on the climate front, I'm 56 years old, me, and I've been told 7 different things why we should go green or what's happening with the climate. I don't believe any of them. Your new Generation X person who's just like 20 years old don't believe everything they said. But I've been told it's going to go too cold. I've been told it's the ozone layer. I've been told it's this. I've been told it's that. I've been told that our electromagnetic field around the earth's going to go and all that lot. And I'm just sick of the crap that I'm being told. And I don't believe anything to do with climate change now. I might have been a bit different if they'd not told me all them things, but they told me all them things. I'm 56. Paul's been through this. Pat's been through this. Half the chat will agree that that's what they heard. It's going to freeze, it's going to that, this, that, and the other. We really do need to get our government out and kick people out. Now, the facial recognition and the cameras, you know, the only thing I can say to people, if you're not doing anything wrong, what you're worried about, that's all I'm going to say. And, you know, with the kind of climate we have with knife attacks and people just randomly murdering people, I feel a bit safer knowing that these cameras are there looking. I do feel a little bit safer because we live in a dangerous world, Years ago when I was a teenager, I wouldn't be bothered about this sort of thing, but now I'm old and I've got my grandniece who travels up here from her other side of Manchester on the tram lines in Manchester, which is and the Oldham tram line is the most dangerous one of all tram lines. And she travels on that all the time to and from school. And I'm concerned about her safety. You know what I mean? I'm concerned. So I'm glad there's cameras at the tram tracks and stuff like that. If there weren't cameras at the tram tracks, when the guy who got attacked in Werneth and got kicked 100 times to his head and body, nobody would have known anything about that. And he would have just been found dead. And these lads would have never have been convicted of the crime. So I'm glad we have CCTV in certain areas. I really am. And, but, you know, it only goes so far and then they can cross the line when obviously protests and things like that and the weighing you up with the cameras and they can cross the line, but I do feel that we do need some of these measures that they want to do. I do feel we need this CCTV in such a dangerous Britain that we live in. It's just unbelievable. You know what I mean? We're like a rape might have took in some side alley. They do it in broad daylight in front of everyone.
Can I jump in and be really rude?
Yeah, of course. Go on, Marcus.
You've invited me on to give my say, yes. So if I may, chaps, I don't want to be rude, but Britain is the most surveyed CCTV country in Europe, probably in the West. Far from stopping these crimes, crime is going through the roof. It's never been higher. We see that even when people are convicted, that they go through the courts, they're given the tap on the wrist and they're back out on the streets. So having more policemen on the streets is the answer to dealing with the crimes that are spiraling out of control. Getting the rainbow flags out their hands, getting the politicization and the weaponization of the police into this liberal left organization that are there for every sexual activity under the sun is not doing anybody any favors. Now, I do understand what you're saying, John, in relation to having the cameras there, but they're after the fact. It's too late. The woman's been raped by that time. The kid's been stabbed, on and on and on. There's a big protest in London against stop and search. Stop and search works. There's no two ways about that. If there is a description out there, if you're 10 foot tall, if you're white, you get stopped. If you're 3 foot tall and you're a red Indian dressed as Hiawatha, you wouldn't get stopped because they go on the description. So there's nothing I see racist about it. The race card's used time and time again to stop this. But on your point about the cameras and how they would be used, now during the COVID era, which I feel was the beta test to see how we would react to being locked up in our homes like animals, most people complied, even to the absurd rule of 6, where you had to be 2 meters apart. I mean, as it's turned out, these ideas were written on the back of a fag packet in Imperial College London, and they were absolutely useless to a man. Now, I didn't comply with the regulations. I had elderly members of my family to attend to that I was told not to. They were going out their wits' end. They were losing the plot. I'm sure all of you guys listening out there felt the same, that it wasn't enough. The science was absolute bollocks. And as it turned out, they were all pissing it up in Downing Street or Holyrood in Scotland. They were visiting their holiday homes. Matt Hancock, Professor Neil Ferguson, you name them, they were breaking the regulations. Nicola Sturgeon, they were breaking the regulations. So I fear that these cameras would be used for facial recognition to identify those people that are breaking curfew, right? If we move to this central digital currency and if we move to a credit score society, which is all part of the World Economic Forum plan for us all, then we're going to go down that road where these cameras aren't used for our own safety. That's what they always say, isn't it? This is to keep you safe. It's what all dictators say. Hitler said the same thing. This was to keep you safe. I don't think there's any argument to have any more cameras to the ones we've got. We are the most surveilled country in the West, and we have a crime rate that's spiraling out of control. I think these cameras will be used against us, sadly, and not for us until we have significant change that you're talking about. And I'll just add to get onto that change, with the first past the post system, chaps, it ain't going to happen anytime soon that Paul was talking about. Paul's talking about us getting together and forming parties and alliances, yes, but there always seems to be factions and fractions within the centre or within the right. I don't think you're left-leaning parties, though it's very difficult to see what is left and what is right these days. Yeah, Pat's laughing. Pat's laughing when I called him a lefty. Listen, I got called a leftist today. I got called a lefty because I wasn't in favour of funding endless foreign wars. I'm a lefty.
Position, Marcus, as you probably know.
Yeah, so anyway, that's my piece into what John was saying. Yeah, I do take it that he's quite right when he said the cameras do give us evidence in court, but half of these perpetrators are all wearing hoodies and masks. It's very, very difficult, and a lot of them are in the country. We don't even know who the bloody hell they are. They don't have an identity. They're John Doe. If you're a convict on the run from Europe, the number one destination for you is a dinghy. You come over here, you wipe the slate clean, and some of these guys are working with the vulnerable. The first place they go are care homes, because that's where we've got a need. You see them on the GB News and Talk TV. While the migrants are over here, why don't we make them work? Can you think of a better advert for illegal migrants to come over? 4-star hotel for a year, then you're out and you're working in a care home. You're looking after my mother. We don't know who the F you are. Yeah, you could be Romania's version of Fred West, or you could be the nicest man in Lithuania. I don't know, but we've got background and checks in this country for a reason, chaps. If any of you three or us four were going for a job working with vulnerable people, we would be checked, and quite rightly. With these guys coming over at such a pace, we don't know who they are. And I've had it on good authority that from the 750,000, let me just say that figure again, 750,000 net migration to the UK last year. A massive percentage of those haven't been properly background checked because they don't have the resources to do the checks. They're pushing them through at an alarming rate.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that because the actual state itself has been invaded and totally subverted. I mean, you've seen the people running the Home Office now?
I have.
The foreigners.
People in the Home Office who are illegal migrants themselves.
Exactly. I mean, the Equality Act that Labour passed just before they lost power, it meant that anybody who was foreign was given priority over the British people in terms of employment. And it's been in the public sector that Equality Act has been most rigorously applied. And basically, they've driven British people out of the British civil service and the British state sector. And they're giving priority to Asians, Africans, whatever. And these people, of course, they don't care what happens to this country. They don't care about crime. They don't care about immigration. They don't care how our taxes are being abused and used. They don't care about who's milking the benefit system. They just don't care. So the people who run in the country now, the gatekeepers, they're the enemy. Well, actually, you just said before that first past the post injures us and stops us being effective. We've got to use the system that's available. We've got to start winning elections again. I mean, I was in the BNP when they won 50 plus seats at local elections, and they won county council elections and MEPs. Obviously, that was PR. But we've seen the SNP in Scotland, the way they overturned the two established parties. You need to have a popular rebellion. And it could start at the local level, because people will vote differently at local level. But even now, because the Tories and Labour and Lib Dem, you can't put a cigarette paper between them. They're all pushing the same globalist agendas. If people get a Labour government and it flops, it gets even worse. And then what? What's going to happen then? People aren't going to go back to a Rishi Sunak Tory party. They know the Lib Dems are a joke. We've got to have an alternative in place. And we've just seen in Germany something remarkable. Not only the uprising of the farmers and the small business people and this amazing electoral surge of the Alternative for Deutschland, but the state have organized a counter-attack, a counter-revolution on the streets of Germany. They've just got 1 million people on the streets of Berlin. These are the left have mobilized against the people, but they're only in the big urban centers like Berlin and Hamburg and Munich. In the smaller towns and in the countryside, the left are virtually invisible in Germany. So they can't control the whole country. But we're seeing effectively now, and we're going to see it in 2024, it's going to unfold. We're going to see social breakdown. We're going to see the coherence. People will no longer submit to a state they don't believe in. They will no longer submit to a state whose agenda is to destroy them, as we said, to bleed them dry of their money, to strip them of their rights, to criminalize them. You see, even though in the pandemic it took a long time for people to react, eventually they did. We had the Canadian truckers in rebellion. I was involved in all the anti-vax demos in this country and the street demonstrations, and they got bigger and bigger. Eventually in London, there were hundreds of thousands. People know there's something wrong. And you see, because of social media, they can't dominate us with a narrative anymore. We can get the counter-narrative out on Twitter. And so things are bubbling up. Politically, things now are starting to really bubble up. Although you see this big lead for the Labour Party and the Tories in second place, I speak to people every day. Nobody now will call themselves a Labour supporter or a Tory supporter. There is actually total disillusionment with the political establishment in this country. And there's room for a populist voice. We haven't had yet, it hasn't really coalesced around one party. We're disappointed with the Reform Party. We've just seen Richard Tice going to the Ukraine to support the Ukraine. This is another globalist war. I mean, they're trying to get our lads involved in this Ukrainian war. They want to send British lads over there to become cannon fodder for the psychopaths who run the globalist, world order. We've got to have a total rebellion against all these policies. I mean, the Reform Party, it's looking like a lightweight Tory party. We need a genuine populist party, a MAGA army, if you like, in Britain, a British People's Rebellion. And it's going to be happening all over Europe, all over the West, because across the West now, the people who rule over us are actually seeking to destroy us. People are waking up to this. They're waking up to the reality of this. For so long, we've conformed to the establishment because it's produced the goods. We've had improved living standards. We've lived longer. But that's all disappearing now. We're under a lot of pressure. And there's 50,000 UK businesses on the brink of bankruptcy. If interest rates stay at this level, 5.5%, this year is going to see a recession, and people are going to be under more and more pressure. John's already mentioned Oldham and the massive budget shortfall there. Council after council. Sorry? Council after council
No, I'm just saying,
are hundreds of millions in debt. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Council after council are hundreds of millions in debt in this country, on the verge of bankruptcy. 25 councils have already declared bankruptcy. And now there's a rebellion in the House of Commons saying there's not enough money for the councils, but the government's got no money. It can't borrow anymore. When you've got interest rates of 5.5%, if you borrow money, it costs a fortune in interest repayments. The country is effectively broke. So there's like a pressure cooker now developing from every angle. And the only way we can reclaim control of our societies and our nation and our borders is a popular rebellion. Just as eventually it happened during the pandemic, it's got to happen now. John?
Thank you. I can't believe our hour is nearly up already. It just feels like 15, 20 minutes. It really does. But let me just go through the chat. Thank you in the chat coming on. Very good chat. I like a lot of the stuff you said. I mean, we'll have to have you on again and we can talk about another subject, but awesome. Thank you very much. Obviously, we've had input off the mighty Pat Rimmer and the Holy Paul Rimmer and myself, but thank you in the chat. Our links at the bottom there, National Housing Party. I have put Marcus's YouTube channel in, which I'll do again, and I'll put his Twitter link in the chat as well, and please subscribe to his YouTube channel. There's some really good interviews on his channel, really good interviews, and we'll see where we go from there. But thank you everyone in the chat. Thank you for tonight. I've been busy myself today. We had the face-to-face meeting with Andy Burnham at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority building today in Manchester. Of my friend Bernie, whose house fell down 3 years ago, and I've supported her all the way through. So we've had a pretty decent meeting today, and she's got made a good contact to solve the rest of her problems. So I'm busy all the time, me, and I'm not just gonna peg my finger and say I'm doing local things. I challenge Greater Manchester mayors, the police, anybody who's got any slight sort of humph in Manchester. You just better watch out for me, because I'm going to challenge you. Angela Rayner, I've been to your offices many a time. You won't even come out and talk to me. All we do is see you at the election count with your big spaceman bloody boots on. But you don't say nothing about the little kids stabbing each other in the shop near you. You don't say nothing about the newsagents that's 10 minutes away, where they've had little girls in the back of the newsagents getting them drunk. You don't say nothing about that. And you just like to call Tories scum or people who are right wing. Well, I just think you're a dog. That's what I think you are. A lap dog. That's all you are. And you're not becoming Labour leader. And I'm knocking on your offices again in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, thank you very much to the chat. Thank you, everyone. Part of you, any last words?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of last words and hand over to Marcus for last words. Just a few things. As a party, we don't acknowledge the word racist. We don't defend ourselves or anyone else of that concepts. And same with anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia, sexism, misogynism. Need to stop using these terms and get them out of our society. We're against bullying. Pretty simple. It's very straightforward. We're against bullying. And we're against the invasion of Gaza. We're against the Ukraine war against Russia. These are globalist operations. This is the heart of globalism. We want to leave NATO. NATO is the military arm of the globalist anti-white agenda and anti-Christian agenda, which has destroyed the West. Just quickly, the reason we're in this position and we've got no council seats anywhere in the country for our sort of politics is all because of Nigel Farage. He has taken us back 5-6 years, and we would be in the same position as the National Rally in France if it wasn't for Nigel Farage. He mopped up all the support and then he gave it all back to the Tories in 2019. We've got to start again. We have started again, but there's going to be an earthquake soon. There's going to be a massive vacuum to fill, and we need parties ready to fill that vacuum. You know, there's one or two other parties I would endorse, British Democrats, you know. But anyway, I'll leave it there, hand it over to Marcus. Thanks a lot, Marcus, for coming on. Really interesting what you're saying. I was fascinated the whole thing, what you're saying. Excellent stuff. I'll hand it over to you, Marcus.
Thank you very much, John, Pat, and Paul, for inviting me onto your show. And keep up the good work. Same to all your listeners and viewers that you have in. They'll be doing their own thing. I totally agree with you that there are ways and means and solutions to get out of this mess that we're in as a country. We've done it before against foreign enemies, and perhaps we'll do it this time against domestic ones. But together, with people like yourself leading from the front, prepared to put their neck and their heads above the parapet, I do salute you for taking a stand. It isn't easy. You've got family, you've got friends, you'll take a lot of flack, but it's all worth it. And obviously, you're all thick-skinned enough and battle-hardened enough to take it to the next level and see us through. So I'm very optimistic about the future, and hopefully we can get one of you or all three of you on to Herding News at some stage in 2024. But thank you very much again, guys, for everything and the invite. God bless you.
Thanks a lot, Marcus. Brilliant. Take care, guys. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks to the chat. My last few words. I mean, I know people are going to look Telford. I'm not telling you not to, but we have a demo in Rochdale on the 3rd of February. There is train strikes, but if you live in Greater Manchester, please try and attend Rochdale. We're going to have speakers who are going to name people who are guilty of letting kids get assaulted, raped and stuff like that. Police officers are going to be named, and I'm already weighing up talking about Lord Janner, Lord Janner, Cyril Smith, the MP in Wakefield, the Tory MP in Wakefield who were done for abusing a kid, and Lord Ahmed in Rotherham who abused kids. I'm going to be talking about all them people on the 3rd of February in Rochdale. So if you can join us there, that'd be really good. But please, come on. We need some boots on the ground in Rochdale. It's central to what's going on. You've seen everything in the news. We can tell you everything. And you're going to hear names and that will be recorded. People are going to send names of police officers, social services, anybody who's guilty of letting our kids get abused. But have a good time if you go in Telford. I'm sure it'll be okay and it'll be quite big, but we need some support in Rochdale. There is train strikes, but if you can get to Rochdale on the 3rd of February, that would be really awesome. I mean, I'm going to be speaking. I think we've got Nick Buckley, the independent Murder and Crime Commissioner candidate. He's going to be speaking. And we'll have several other guests who are going to be speaking. I've got my mate, David and Caroline coming down from Glasgow. They do a good job. Their job is they call out paedophiles when they've been put into the community again. If they live next to schools, they go around to the houses and get them moved out. And Davey is actually in court next month over this in the High Court. But they've been doing this for a couple of years, both Caroline and Davey, and I'm hoping to see them in Rochdale on the 3rd. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's been great. And we'll catch you all up soon. Don't forget, if you're part of it and you come Bible class, that'll be tomorrow. I'm not sure. I should be on, but I can't always guarantee it. Obviously, I do the late night veteran show on a Friday as well, if you want to join that. And we're doing a Big Brother at the camp. But I'll talk about that on Friday. But thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely evening.